All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Assuring Autonomy, which is a series that we started last year. This season, we're going to talk directly with people who are outside the industry who are using the technology in really interesting ways. We're extremely fortunate today to have Aaron Horinek. Aaron is a farmer and he's coming to us from Colby, Kansas. And which I think it's really appropriate that we start in Kansas. I mean, not only is it the breadbasket, the United States, and you and your family do fantastic work feeding us all. You're a corn farmer, as I understand it.
Yep.
But Kansas is also, it's kind of like the cradle of aviation in many respects. I think
Right.
people in Ohio will be mad at me for saying that. But the truth of the matter is a huge amount of aircraft get manufactured in Kansas and
Right.
have been for a long, long time. So
Yep.
I think it's really kind of interesting. So welcome, Aaron, and thank you very much for taking time out of what I'm sure is a very busy time for you. Tell us a little bit. I mean, are you somebody who loved things that fly when you were growing up, and how did you get into using drones in your farming?
No, thanks for having me on. I'm definitely not a drone expert, but I've been around them enough to probably at least confuse people. But no, I'm not really a plane guy. I didn't grow up flying. I don't have a pilot's license. I'm not an aviation guy. Now my best friend from high school is, and so I would go up and fly with him. Geez, he was flying by the age of 17, and he now owns the airport in the town over. So I mean, it's not like I was foreign to it. I'd go up in his Cessna and we'd cruise around and stuff. But that's really the extent of my aviation background. But I'm still a guy, and we like our toys, and we like to, find fun things to do. And so I think, oh, geez, now probably about 8 years ago, these were starting to become affordable, and the technology was getting fairly easy to fly them. So that's kind of how I got started with it. It was just like, well, man, this might be a cool thing to help on our operation, and more than anything, it's just for fun.
So did you start? So which was it of those two things, or do they sort of come together? It was kind of like, hey, this is a cool toy, but it's got tremendous utility too. For
You could see, I mean, you can see right away. You start thinking about, oh man, I could see from the air, and
yeah,
I can do it simple, and I can do it fast, and I can do it quick, and it's cheap. So it went from really quickly being, oh, this would be fun to have one. Let's just see what we can do with it. And being able to go, oh man, there is some practical use for this thing that we can use, more often than just on a Saturday afternoon for fun. I mean, they were pretty bang bang.
so tell me a little bit about what you're using it for. Are you using it just to kind of look at what's happening with the crops, or or have you taken it beyond that, or
So
how's the utility work? What's the utility of
yeah,
it?
so with agriculture, and I think there's two ways to really use aerial imagery. And pretty much no matter how you're using them, you're going to break them down into these two broad categories. And that would be one, is there something we can do a management practice from, right? So like, can we gain something from this image or this video or this orthomosaic that can help us change direction for this crop year? That's one. So management decisions. But then number two is just research. You know, I'm going to gain information from this crop or this image, and it might not help me do anything this year, but maybe it'll help me down the road to go, oh man, I see something here. I
See a
see something.
trend.
Right. And then, or go back and look and say, I missed this. Maybe there's something in the air I missed. So, we go back there and look at a picture or whatever it might be. And so those are kind of the two main things that you can use for in agriculture. And I think that's pretty basic. But so, even within those things, you can just take a picture, you can take a video, and just kind of zoom around, go over a field. And what I like to do is take pictures, take video from different angles. Because what you'll notice is the sunlight crop will look different from just merely turning the drone, 90 degrees. You'll get a completely different view.
Hmm.
And so that's primarily what I do when I'm flying it. I do some stitching. I do some orthomosaics,
Hmm.
take it up on a flight pattern, taking, 400, 500 pictures from a field and then bringing it back in and stitching it and then getting an orthomosaic. But that's a lot more time. You can fly 2,000 acres just, with a video and a camera in that mode, and you can fly 2,000 acres in an hour. I mean, it's fast.
And I know you participate in the Kansas Farm Bureau, and I think we got to you through the American
Yep.
Farm Bureau. They refer us to Kansas Farm Bureau, and they identified you. Are you guys talking about this among yourselves? I know you participate in.
Yeah, Kansas Farm Bureau is a part of the American Farm Bureau. So the American Farm Bureau is a group of all 50 states, and each state has a membership delegation. Mm-hmm. And typically, we're a grassroots organization, so all of our policy that we lobby for, that we want, to come through government or just community outreach, is done from the bottom up. And so a member might come in and say, hey, we see UAVs coming in. What's our stance? What is Farm Bureau going to do to help it, or help our senators say this is something that needs either regulated or not regulated? That started probably creeping up in 2013. Probably when it kind of got popular. I think we started to see a lot of that immediately. And so Kansas Farm Bureau was actually one of the first states to really say, hey, there's a lot of technology creeping up here, not just in UAVs, but also on autonomy on the ground, right? That was kind of starting to be the big push. What can we autonomize, as we move forward in the next 20 years? And so Kansas went out and actually made a task force, or what we called a task force. And they took, I think there's 10 or 12 of us from across the state, just like me, mostly farmers. We would meet 2 or 3 times a year and just kind of go over, what does our policy need to say? How are we going to integrate this in? How are we going to make sure that we push for this and allow it to take off and let Kansas kind of be a leader? And so that was kind of the start. I think that was like 2015-ish, 2014, 15. So by then we were already having meetings, and we started to actually write policy for our Kansas membership to say, we encourage drones or UAVs, we encourage the use of them. And so we started, making policy or what we'd like to see. And that kind of just trickled on up. And some of our stuff that we kind of got started in Kansas eventually made it to the American Farm Bureau and was put into their national policy.
Yeah, that's super important. The key word that I heard there was grassroots, and no pun intended, but you guys do grow things, and super important. And I want to take the opportunity to give a shout out to my buddy Bob Brock, who is the UAS lead at the Kansas Department of Aviation, and he obviously, I don't think that's a position that existed before. I want to say about 2016, and
Yep.
So yeah, this has all been really strongly supported by the state.
So I actually went to a 3-day deal with him, and they had, Kansas was very forward thinking. I mean, I think a lot of it was his pushing. Yeah, we went to Kansas City and met for 3 days, and I know I was there kind of representing agriculture. We had transportation people there, for the state of the KDOT, talking about, well, how can we use drones to check bridges and stuff. Yep. And so, we spent 2 or 3 days down there with him as the lead, just kind of brainstorming where we go from there. And that was like 2017, I think.
Let me bring it back, because you said something really interesting. As you may know, AUVSI, we're all things unmanned. And so we operate in the ground domain as well as the maritime domain. And but go back to the automated stuff on the ground. Tell me a little bit about your experience with unmanned systems, or robots, as it were, in aviation. Are you using any of those specifically?
We're not, but man, that is I would say in 2013, 14, 15, aerial unmanned systems was all the rage, right? Like, okay, these are all the things we're going to be able to do with UAVs, drones, whatever. And so I think as that was kind of almost through like the peak of the aerial stuff, now we're really starting to see a big push. What can we do on the ground? The things they're going to pull, and how we're going to do that. Then, there's talk about, well, you're going to have big you're going to try to replace. So for example, like on our operation, we might have a 400 horse tractor, a 370 horse tractor, and, big tractors, and we're pulling 60-foot, equipment behind it. So then, it's like, well, does the industry want to go that way, where we have big equipment that's unmanned, or do we want to go more of the small, Are we going to start replacing big equipment, instead of having 60-foot planters or whatever? We're going to go to 4-rail planters, maybe 8-foot wide, 10-foot wide, 12-foot wide, and have more of them. And so that's kind of the big, I'd say, tug a little bit in the ag industry.
It's coming together very interesting. I want to take you back to your buddy that runs the airport, right?
Okay.
What does he think about drones? And you said the airport's not that far away. So from a safety perspective, what's the conversation look like from your standpoint?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't really talked to him about that. So I always make this caveat. They say, well, aren't you worried about people safety? And, when I'm flying and stuff, and I'm like, you have to realize about 20% of our acres are in a township where there's 144 square miles. Okay. So it's 12 foot by 12 foot. And there's like 21 registered people that live there. We are such a rural area.
Mm-hmm.
You can fly a long time and you won't see a car. You won't see a person. You won't see anything. So I think we're in a slightly different area from a safety standpoint. Now we do have crop dusters, which a lot of areas don't have. But roughly, we know what time of year they're going to be flying. So I'm obviously more conscious of that. Because like, okay, there's a chance they're going to be out here. But I've never really had that conversation with him from an airport standpoint. My neighbor's a crop duster down the other way. And so I'm always kind of cautious, because he's your neighbor. And
right.
So you got to be careful about where you're flying and knowing where you're flying and seeing them. But I think that's a lot of what we run into that a lot of people don't, is we just don't have nearly the traffic, both aerially and on the ground. We just don't have people.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're pretty sold on this as a tool, and it sounds like you're excited about the future of autonomous vehicles or highly automated vehicles on the ground as well. How do you see the future? I mean, is this going to continue to integrate? Do you see a time where these two devices are necessarily talking to each other? Something on the ground, something in the air. How does that integration going to work? And how do you get smarter over time getting that trending data, do you think?
Yeah, and I don't know. I think, I don't know as far as aerial UAV type stuff or autonomous stuff. Are we today where we thought we'd be in 2015? I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we were probably a little over zealous about what we would be able to do from the air. And I think the technology is there and is getting better. I think it's mostly just a time thing. I mean, for my operation, there's no doubt the data is phenomenal. I mean, you're getting data. The question is, do you have time to continually to do it? Because it is a time drain to do. So, I mean, the time is the big thing, I think, for most operations from an aerial side, and most farms are understaffed. On my operation, it's hard to say, I'm going to hire you to fly a drone, but 3 months out of the year, you need to work on a corn head. That person is not real easy to find, someone who wants to do both. From an autonomy side, I get real excited about ground autonomy. I'm of the mindset that smaller autonomy will be eventually the future. Maybe it's not my lifetime. I don't know. I think we're still a long ways off from having enough sensory data. Because even when we're like working in the field and we're planting or harvesting or whatever, you're stopping every once in a while because you might have a mechanical problem, like a disc gets jammed or a fertilizer hose gets popped off or whatever. And so you're going to have sensory data to say, hey, row 7 is not turning. You need to stop this autonomous vehicle and go fix it. But the future to me is small stuff excites me beyond because to me, what we're doing now is not, our operation is data. When we plant, that planter is making data to the inch. I know this planter put on this much seed, this type of seed, this much fertilizer. It put on this much weight, like we put this much downforce, and it's making a map when we're spraying. I mean, every operation we're doing is collecting data, and then we're layering that to help make better decisions. Well, as equipment's gotten bigger, your data gets more fuzzy because now instead of having an 8-foot data, now you have a 60-foot data or 120-foot data, right? And so you're going to have 20 foot in there, that's yielding different than the next 20 foot, but it all gets blended together. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah. Now you're teaching me some stuff I didn't know, so that's really important.
And so it kind of gets fuzzy, and as our equipment gets bigger, that fuzz gets bigger because, you know, this side of the combine can cancel out this side of the combine. So instead of knowing row 1 yielded 140 bushel, row 12, something was wrong with it, it yielded 60, right? Instead, you just say, well, they made 100. And so as autonomy and what I forward see and what I think and get excited is going, okay, let's, instead of one 60-foot planter, let's have 4 15-foot planters, you know, or 6 10-foot planters. And now instead of having one 60-foot data wide strip, you have 6 data wide strips, right? And you can say, wow, this, you know, this here, or as we harvest, it's the same thing. We're getting more data, but it's not fuzzy. It's like, man, you know, eventually what I think would be really cool is have 1 row harvesters, right? So right now, all of our stuff, we harvest 12 rows at a time. We have 3 combines. Each one's harvesting 12 rows at a time, and the data's coming in across those 12 rows. What I think would be super cool, and it might not be my lifetime, would be to say we have 1 row harvesters, and that harvester's going down, and it's picking 1 row at a time, and it says, you got this many ears of corn off this acre. Mm-hmm. You got, you know, you had skips. Each ear weighed this much, right? Because you just get that much more data as you get smaller. And so, I mean, to me, that's super exciting. And we're not even close to that. This is like way forward thinking. But you start to see the technology today makes that a lot more accessible than it was 20 years ago.
Well, it's super important what you're saying. I think we're seeing the acceleration of that. You know, so it's hard to predict. We tend to, as somebody famously said, we tend to overestimate what we can do in 2 years, but us underestimate what'll happen in 10.
Yeah.
And so who knows? You're a younger man than I am. You may well see it, but and I may not. But one way or the other, it's really exciting. And I learned a lot from this conversation, Aaron. I'm not sure who it's going to be more interesting to. You know, your colleagues and your peers in the farming industry, or other farmers, or people who are doing things that are somewhat contiguous or analogous to what you're doing, like you said during that meeting that you referred to with, you know, DOT people that were looking at bridges, et cetera.
Yep.
Aaron, thanks very much for taking time to talk to us today. We're going to be putting this out on social media to your cohorts in the farming world, to ours in the unmanned systems community, and everybody's going to learn a lot from what you're doing. So really appreciate it, and hope you and your family do well in Colby, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.